you guys can all visualize color. And again, the important thing is to remind yourselves that there is no expectation about how anything is supposed to look. Most people aren't getting, maybe a couple people will with color, but I'm certainly not. And most people are not, like, every time you say a color, are seeing the color so vividly and strong as if it was, you know, that's all you were going to see. And that's really how it is with our visualizations. In the exercise for last Tuesday's class you listened to, where I said a word, like the word yes, and then, or no, and then you just saw what your natural picture was. You notice with that too, that sometimes things will be very vivid and strong, and other times, you know, it's like, okay, it was just such a quick little picture of something. And this is really true, exactly true with your clairvoyance. And with your clairvoyance, oftentimes, and you know, let me just hit mute here. With your clairvoyance, oftentimes the information just, it comes in so quickly as a flash. And there's all sorts of ways, just like you could start to see with this, like even just doing this simple let me see a color exercise. The first time you say that to yourself, you may have a sense of the color like lower down and in a certain pattern or shape. And then the second time, maybe it's more spread out and it's somewhere else in your field of vision. I'll be using the word screen simultaneously with field of vision. Now, we will be working with the visual of a screen sometimes, but just know when I say field of vision, it's just where that whole area of wherever your visuals appear to you. And as we go along here today, I want to start off talking about our different types of psychic abilities. And when the clairvoyant images come in, sometimes they're mixed in with your other abilities, and you won't always even be able to say for sure, like, oh, was that a visual? Sometimes if you really stop and think and kind of take a few steps back, you'll find, yeah, that was a visual because I can describe what it looked like. And then you'll know, okay, that was a visual, so that was my clairvoyance. But then on top of that, you may have you might have knowing with it or a feeling or something like that. People who naturally feel a lot and get information that way sometimes think that they're just feeling. And then when I really start to question, like, how, because they'll describe what to me sounds like a picture, but they'll say, yeah, that came in as a feeling, but then they're able to describe a picture. So if you can describe a picture at all, even if it was really fast and very subtle, that is your clairvoyance, but it may be coming in also with a feeling. Some of that too is where you're located in your body, and we're going to talk about that too today. So what I want to start off with is a discussion of our different psychic abilities. And I've talked a little bit about this, but I don't think I really did in depth. Do you guys remember me like going through each psychic ability and
we did not.
giving examples of each? Okay, thank you. So I've talked about clairvoyance. So clairvoyance is the visual ability to see information in the form of colors or pictures and images, vision. And what you guys have been doing when you go to visualize your grounding cords or you go to visualize your energy running, it probably is more what we call your visualization. It's when you say, I'm going to visualize yellow, and you visualize it, that is you using your visualization skills. However, what happens if you go to visualize yellow and then a man's face pops out? Or you go to visualize yellow but purple swirls come in and something happens. That man's face or those purple swirls, you could say, is your clairvoyance. Now, even it's your clairvoyance starting to give you some very basic information. By basic, I don't have any, I'm not meaning judgment by basic. I'm comparing, say, basic to higher level information, and you'll hear me say those words. So basic information would be, I go to visualize yellow, but I see when I do that, this man's face pops up. Or a brown color starts to swirl through the yellow that I didn't expect. So it's something starts to happen you didn't expect, and it may be pertinent, there may be meaning there. There's a reason why that's happening. So a lot of times you don't need to get caught up with the reason, but sometimes it's interesting because if you were to explore that more, you'd start to get higher level information. So let's say you're seeing yellow and brown swirly something starts to come in. That brown swirly is basic information that you would then probe. Then let's say that's when a man's face pops up. So then the man's face, that would be slightly higher level information. Okay, now there's even more of a form here. Something happened, and I wasn't planning on visualizing a man. If I said, okay, everyone, I want you to visualize a man, that's your visualization. But if the man's face just comes up, that's your clairvoyance. So now we've got the brown, that's the basic, and then we've got the man's face as you look at it coming up. And now let's say as you're looking at the man's face, you get an image of him holding some keys as if he was handing over some car keys. And so that you're starting to get into even higher level information. Higher level just as far as it may be more detailed, and it may start to be coming with some more meaning. And let's say even at that point, you're just describing this, but you don't quite know what that is, but you're, okay, there's this man, he's handing over what appears to be car keys. Maybe you knew they were car keys the second you saw them, or maybe you weren't really sure at all. It was just you identified it as this very quick, vague picture of car keys being handed over. Maybe it was vague, maybe it was really clear. It could be across the whole spectrum. And just because something comes in vague, or, I think I just saw a guy with car keys or with some keys, but it happened so fast, that doesn't mean that if it comes in fast versus it came in really strong and seemed to linger longer, that doesn't mean that the lingering longer is more meaningful or not. There doesn't seem to be, a difference in how profound or anything it is, if it just flashed for a second where it was barely discernible. Like, wait a second, I kind of remember a couple seconds ago seeing this man with keys. Or, there's, right there, it's really strong. Actually, though, that being said, if an image of a guy holding keys appeared and it was really, really strong and it lingered for a while, and maybe even the man started to say something, I would say that tends to happen a bit more in the case of when there's a spirit involved, which we could say mediumship, but basically there's no difference here except the subject matter. If a spirit is around and they're wanting to give some communication, sometimes the imagery that comes in with that can be stronger because it's stronger as far as it stays longer. or you might start to get like a stream of information. And the reason for that may be because there's a presence, an ongoing presence that's actually communicating in real time. So it's not just the flash before was now what's a memory to you, and it just came in there. But in scientific terms, you could call it a stimulus that isn't in past time anymore. It's still continuing to project communication or emit information, and so that might stay up longer or be more vibrant. And sometimes psychics are trying to decide when they see someone like, oh, is this a living person or not living? That question can be confusing because, or difficult for a psychic to tell, psychic or medium. Right now I'm using those words interchangeably. We could discuss those words later, but to whoever is doing the perceiving, if you want to know, is this person dead or alive, if you ask the person, are they dead or alive, and they're dead, a lot of times they actually appear, they usually won't say they're dead at all. They don't see themselves as dead. And I'm saying this from my experience and every other psychic I talk to. And if anything, they come across as more alive, more vibrant, and clear. And I think that the reason for that, again, is because their presence is right there. And if their presence is there, it's going to be stronger. But besides for that, don't think that if your images are just, if you get a color and it's just so vague, or an image and it just happens so fast, don't think that that's any less valid than when it lingers longer. But so that is so getting back to my example of you were trying to look at yellow, so you were just trying to visualize. The brown came in, and then a guy's face came in, and then you looked at that a little longer, and you saw some keys, and you're like, what's going on with this hand with keys? And you probe the keys. Now, as I'm describing this, you don't want to be getting into the mindset of what is this? I don't understand this. I have to figure this out. Whenever you go to figure something out, you're actually overemphasizing your logic. You're getting into your logic and analytical parts of yourself, and that is the opposite of just allowing the intuitive-based information to come through. So you always want to just, like, if you start to do that, which you will, because that's what we do as people with brains, we always want to figure something out. So then you have to tell yourself, take a deep breath. I don't have to, it's not for me to figure this out. It's for me to relax and watch. So I'm going to look at those keys, like what else do I get from them? That's when maybe I see, or you would see, an image of a car and two people getting into a car. And at that point, you might start to get a knowingness. Now, and I want to go into what knowingness is. Now, you may never get to where the knowingness comes in. You might just get picture after picture until so many pictures are clear, it makes sense to the person that you're reading. And some pictures come in and they're just so clear. If you get a picture of someone, like let's say your client's trying to sell their house, and you get a picture of a for sale sign in front of a house, and then someone coming up and pulling up the sign and two people shaking hands and they're carrying the sign away. Well, that would be almost self-explanatory. Or let's see a simpler picture. A person is in their office and well, this isn't such a simple picture, but they're in their office and you see a picture. Well, you may have no context at all, but you see what looks like an office because there's a desk and the person's clearing stuff off the desk and putting their stuff in a box. So you don't need like a knowing sense to come in. You just already, this picture is self-explanatory. So we've all heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, not all pictures are, but some are very, they completely convey the meaning in and of themselves. Other times, though, they don't clearly convey a meaning. And, let's say you see a picture of a dog. Okay, well, here's a dog, but that's nowhere near as close to having richness as if you saw a picture of a little kid crying and a man handing a dog over to a doctor. Let's say if that picture came up. Kid on the floor crying, man with the dog in arms, dog looks sick, and there's a doctor, and he's holding it out to the doctor. And maybe there's a couple nurses' faces in there, and they look concerned. And as I'm talking, you guys are probably already doing this, but just, visualize along with me. So that type of picture can come in. That would be an extremely rich clairvoyant picture. Some of you who've already been doing this work for a little longer, it's almost like when you do this longer, your brain can handle more complexity, and so you may, like right off the bat, get some very rich pictures like that. Some of our minds just work that way naturally. It's not even so much like about our psychic abilities, but why is it that one person can just, from a young age, they can paint like incredibly intricate, detailed paintings, and others of us just, can just do like stick figures. Basically, I'm kind of like that. If you give me a picture, I can do an okay job copying the picture, but I can't just get something on a paper without looking at something first. Where I've known many artists where they don't have to look at anything; they can create a whole complex scene on the canvas. And so having those skills can definitely help with clairvoyance, but I can also guarantee you I know a lot of really great clairvoyants and remote viewers that aren't good with art. But so again, it's wonderful and helpful when you get a very complete scene of visuals, but that doesn't mean that that I don't want you to have the expectation that that's going to always happen, or because it won't. That doesn't always happen for me. I could do an hour-long reading, and I might get a couple of those, and then others are more like, okay, there's a dog. I have no idea what the dog is about, but I'm going to, or maybe just there's a brown color, and I have to probe this. Okay, now a dog comes up. Okay, now I have to probe this, and in between I have to remind myself to be patient and calm and not figure it out. And then now I see a doctor or a guy, like maybe I don't know that he's a doctor yet. So I see he's a guy and or a woman in a white coat. The white coat reminds me of something medical. So this and there's a whole hodgepodge of how all of this comes in. Now, when I've taught these classes before, I didn't always go into detail about what to expect. But the reason but then I find that students are, if I just throw them into doing readings, they encounter everything I'm talking about, but they're always judging what they're getting against this picture of what they think they're supposed to be seeing or what they think someone else is seeing. The other thing is that when you hear one person talk, by the time the words come out of their mouth, a whole bunch of processes have happened. So you might think that when you hear a clairvoyant that is giving, good information, accurate information or helpful information, you might think that how it came in was a lot more concise, because by the time they speak about it, they sum it up pretty well. But the inner experience is much different. And this is, in my remote viewing class, I mentioned that this week, I could do, let's say, a remote viewing session of a location. And since I've been doing this for a while, I can go through different inner processes and know what information, sometimes know what's going to be more accurate than others. And I also can recognize where I might be getting off track. I don't always know for sure if I'm getting off track by misinterpreting something, but because I've had enough experience where I saw where I was wrong, where I was constantly wrong and where I was right, I'm able to then, by the time I put down if it's important to me, like I'm in a research project or I really want someone to be impressed by what I'm handing over, I'm editing while I'm going through things. So by the time I hand them the paper, what's on the paper is most likely to be correct. They don't know everything I just went through in my head to get to what was on the paper. So the paper in remote viewing is a form of communication, and what we're doing here, clairvoyant reading, our form of communication is verbal. That being said, when you're learning this, whether you're learning clairvoyant reading or you're learning the various processes of remote viewing a location, you don't want to edit in your head. And especially with clairvoyant reading, with what we're doing here, there is such a richness to your images. And so I still, when I do readings for people, I'm sharing all these images that I'm getting, and I'm sharing the process I'm going through. So I'm now not all experienced clairvoyants work this way. They may get the pictures, sum it up, and then give the summing up. And the summing up would come in what would be higher level information. Higher level information in this case would then just mean, it's where the person can understand it. It makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that it always requires all these clairvoyant steps to go through before it makes sense. Sometimes, and I'll get to knowing, and just instant knowing can sometimes give you that higher level information right away, where you didn't go through all the visuals, you just got something, it landed in your mind, you just knew it. You didn't see it, you didn't hear it, it just suddenly was there and you knew it somehow. So that's knowingness. And when that happens, oftentimes that's higher level information. Just in the same way, if you keep going through the clairvoyant images, you'll get to that, and then it's information, higher level information then would be defined as information that actually could make sense to the person. It might come with a bit more of a storyline. Although I do want to encourage you guys to look out for trying to make nice, neat, coherent stories out of everything, because that's something else we're primed to do. We want to take the information around us and always make a nice, neat package of a story around it. And sometimes that's possible and helpful to the person that you're reading, but there's not always a coherent story in all the information that you're accessing. Okay, so that is clairvoyance. And again, so I like to share the images as I'm getting and what steps I'm going through during a reading. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is because there is such a richness in the images, and because when you're reading someone, your images are a combination of your own symbology and the symbology of the person that you're reading. So sometimes it's more so their symbols than your own. So there's going to be plenty that there's no way is going to ever make sense to you. It makes perfect sense to them because it's their symbol that they had an experience with. And also their symbols will come in certain ways that reflect their personality. So as will their own energy enter into the reading. So I'll explain this in two ways. So one way is, let's say the person is really funny, like they have a really strong sense of humor, they love humor. Well, then their images may be very funny, very comical. And especially if you're open to that sort of thing together, you may be laughing when you talk about them and actually having a pretty good time, like you would if you were in their presence and there's someone who's entertaining. So it may be both the type of image that comes in is entertaining, and also you feel that sense of fun and a feeling level and empathic level. That feeling comes, you get to experience that. Well, what if conversely the person is someone who's very analytical, they don't tend to be very visual, they maybe they're very critical of themselves. Well, first of all, their images may not even show up as very strong to you. You may find that their images are just not all that, they're much drier and not entertaining. And on top of that, you may go into hitting that energy of being super self-judging and critical. So it's like I think of energy as kind of floating, intermingling between the two of you. So you're gonna get a feeling of, this is confusing, this is hard, this is, I don't understand this. If they're in a space of constantly, there's some people, and I didn't know this until I started to do readings, where they're so in their heads and they're in a place of almost like constant anguishing, figuring things out, everything they're trying to think about so hard in order to know what to do. And you will hit that when you read them. And if you have any matches with that, even if you don't tend to do that, actually, if you don't tend to do that, it may be easier to recognize, okay, something's going on here because now I'm hitting this. But if you tend to do that too, you could get very stuck in that energy. And I'll give you an example. I was reading somebody this week, and we started out the reading where she didn't ask me any questions. She just said, okay, just see what comes up. And this is a very good way to do a reading. And once you guys start to do readings, I'm going to have you do this. You won't start off with people's questions till later, because that brings up as soon as someone starts to ask a question, it can send you to the same place in your mind where they are when they ask the question. It can send you into an analytical mode. So, and then it can kind of get you off track. So for you guys, you won't be asking questions initially. And when you do, I'll give you instructions for how to stay in a psychic space instead of going into an analytical space to match where that question is coming from. So, but this woman, so I started off reading her, and it was all fine until I got to her question. And I could see everything I had just talked about actually answered the question. But once she asked the question, which was, she's been happily married for the most part for several years, has a wonderful husband, but their sex life is terrible. And for the past 5 years, she's worked with a guy, and they're in love with each other. But she wouldn't want to leave her husband, but she is in love with this other guy. And they have had a few encounters over the years, but both of them really want to respect her marriage. So she's in this complete dilemma because her husband sounds like he's the nicest guy in the world. He's just not all that exciting in the bedroom. So, what is she to do? She's been obsessing about this for 5 years. So when she asked that question, imagine if someone was asking you that question, what should I do? Should I leave my husband? And I don't really know, will things work out with this other guy or not, because we really haven't spent that much time together. So that sort of thing, like if I'm just saying that, you may be feeling already the stress of like, oh my gosh, like I wouldn't want to have to like tell the person what to do. Well, the nice thing is that our job isn't to tell the person what to do. Our job isn't to, even when they're asking a question, which clients will do that, they'll say, what should I do? What's the right decision? Well, we're not here to tell them the right decision. We're here to say, okay, I'm just going to see what information comes up here that would be helpful for you. So what type of information would be helpful for the person? Well, in this case, what I kept getting before she asked the question was I was getting, it wasn't so much clairvoyant, it was telepathy. So again, the clairvoyance is the visual. Instead of the visual, I was getting telepathic messages straight from her. I could tell that they're from her because it's in her voice. It's an I, and it's her voice. And let me just say, with telepathy, sometimes you'll hear it as the person's voice. Other times, it's coming through your thoughts. So it's not like as if you heard it as you'll hear it clear, but that there's not like an external voice talking. The voice comes through your own thoughts. But it comes through your own thoughts, so you'll have the thought, but you hear it as if they were talking. When it happens, you'll know, and usually there's an I attached to it. So there were messages coming up like, I can't keep living my life this way. I need a change, and so that was coming through, and those words. So what I could do then is just simply reflect back to her what I was hearing. It wasn't I'm telling her what decision to make. I'm telling her that I'm hearing her voice say, I need a change. This isn't working. My life isn't working for me anymore as it is. And that is what oftentimes is valuable to the person and really all we can do. The other thing was, even before she asked her question, I saw an image of these pillars of her life, and the pillars were breaking apart. Now, when I saw that, that kind of alarmed me. Like, that sounds like kind of a scary picture of pillars breaking apart. And I didn't understand it at all, but I did communicate it to her. But in communicating it to her, I had to calm myself down, because my emotional reaction was, gosh, this, pillars breaking apart, that sounds very, very destructive. And what does this mean? I don't know what it means. But before I could even start to explore what it means, I need to calm myself down emotionally, because I'm suddenly feeling worried that, if this is bad and this is going to sound scary to her, and then I have to say, well, bad, I need to get rid of these, dualistic words such as good and bad, because that doesn't help anything here. So I just communicated to her these pillars coming down, because really and then later when we talked, it was clear she's really looking at, if she makes this choice to go, which a part of her is just feeling like she wants out, even though everything else is saying, you've got a great life. And, for a lot of people, it's like, wow, would I really want to just, collapse, destroy the good life I have because of, this other part of me that's just feeling like it wants more. So these are some of the challenges, and I'm just sharing this because even after doing this work for 20 years, I still have to go back to the basic tools of okay, I'm getting emotional, and I know emotion isn't just like, oh, I feel sad or, oh, I feel angry. It enters into the dynamic of, oh my gosh, this looks terrible. So maybe it's fearful, like, and then if I trace it back, it's like, oh well, what if I say something, and she does it, and then she suffers and all of this. So it's like that feeling of responsibility as a reader too, where if you're simply, again, in me reporting, I just saw an image of these pillars collapsing, and they seem to be like pillars somehow surrounding your life. Your life as you know it was my interpretation of that. I'm not giving her advice. I'm not telling her what to do, etc. Now, occasionally it may come up. I've had like a couple times where I was reading a woman and I was getting like such strong information that her husband was up to something not just illegal, but more importantly, dangerous to himself and to her, and a feeling of such like threat coming towards her. And in that case, I shared the threat, and I don't think it was just my reaction to the threat. It seemed like there was a message coming from somewhere strongly and I suspect it was a guide that was saying, you got to get out of this situation immediately or your life is at risk. So there will occasionally be like a message that comes in, and I would say the messages, we don't always know where the messages are coming from, but they do seem to be more from a mediumistic, there's an external source giving the message. So I'm just now, since I want to run through these abilities, so I've talked about clairvoyance, I've talked about telepathy. I want to go into mediumship, and I'll do that right now. But just with the telepathy, I want to just stick with that for one more minute. So with telepathy, there's hearing sounds, and then there's different types of telepathy. It seems like you can have telepathy from a person's mind, mind-to-mind communication, or telepathy from their heart. When I was, and a lot of times both will come in. So the mind of the person may be saying one thing, the heart of the person may be saying something else. And sometimes it's pretty clear where they're coming from, because the heart seems to speak about what they're really wanting. The mind will speak more about like what it's concerned about. Now, you can clairaudience, that's a term that you'll hear. And so I would say telepathy can also be clairaudience, but clairaudience can be also where you might hear a sound that isn't so much coming from a person, but like a sound coming from an environment, such as like if you hear birds chirping or an airplane going over, that is a sound. It's not telepathy. When you hear an airplane, the hum of an airplane, whether at a location or the person has something to do with an airplane and you hear the airplane sound, that's not coming from their mind. It's coming from the same thing, like if an airplane flies over your house and you hear the airplane, it's not from a mind, it's just generated from that thing. And so you can hear sounds as well. When there's a spirit involved, you could say it's telepathy because you're hearing the words of the spirit. So let's just move into mediumship. I just want to describe how we're going to be working with that subject in this class. And as I'm talking, if anyone has a question, just let me know. I'm going to try to just wrap this up in within 10 minutes. So this discussion, and because I want to get you guys practicing here. So with mediumship, that's a very broad term, as is channeling. And I would say these, when you're channeling, channeling is more where you're, channeling is also a broad word. I mean, what does that really mean? That there's a message coming through you and you're the messenger. But I would say in that case, there's different levels. Like if you were doing pure channeling, then you may not be so much working with your own clairvoyance, but it's coming through you. So a message, someone else with information is sending that information through you, and you're just the messenger. And you may not even be conscious. You may be out of your body and not even aware of what it is, the information that you're channeling. But really, you could say with all of this stuff, there's a lot of combination. So what we really do here is we will, when we're not going to spend that much time like directly trying to communicate with spirits, but when you read a person, they have spirits around them. They have deceased loved ones, or they have guides, and so those guides will appear and make themselves known visually, oftentimes clairaudiently or telepathically. So that's the way that we'll be working mostly, is like we'll just be doing readings on people where you'll be looking at them or a symbol for the person or their aura, and any spirits around might start to communicate.